Today I am out here in New York City to get an early first look at the Nintendo Switch 2. There is a lot to cover here, so let's jump in and find out what this is all about. Fresh off the heels of the Nintendo Direct, which was held yesterday from when I'm recording this, the vibe for the Switch 2 is honestly pretty mixed. Yes, it is essentially a bigger, more powerful, and more robust Switch compared to last generation, and its release date is also fast approaching, launching globally on June 5th, with a good amount of games rolling out in the beginning and throughout this year. But all of this comes with a higher price tag than some were expecting. $449 here in the US, which after sitting on it for a day is certainly expensive, but not the worst considering the improved hardware. But perhaps a bigger sticking point for people is Switch 2 game pricing. It is definitely a range, but a lot of major titles like Mario Kart World, for example, can go as high as $80 at retail. On one hand, we already knew the industry was sort of toying around with the idea that games are going to get more expensive across all platforms, especially with the effects of inflation. But with Nintendo opening the floodgates, it doesn't set the most positive tone going into the initial impressions of this console. It's a shame because in a vacuum, separate from all the economics, the Switch 2 actually looks like it's offering solid and fun upgrades in user experience and quality of life. But with that, let's actually get into what it's like experiencing the Switch 2 firsthand. Though, a word from our sponsor first. Huge thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this portion of the video. I am constantly on the move, traveling to tech events, shooting videos, and testing out new products for the channel, which is why I have been loving these, the everyday earbuds from Raycon. Their latest model have seriously impressed me with features that you would normally expect from premium brands, but at literally half the price. The active noise cancellation is surprisingly effective at blocking out those noisy airplane engines during long flights or drowning out the hustle and bustle of busy convention centers. Also, what really stood out to me is the battery life. You get up to around 32 hours total with the charging case. Plus, with its quick charging function, putting the earbuds into the case for 10 minutes nets you around 90 minutes of playback, which can definitely come in handy in a pinch. I also love that this model has multi-point connectivity, allowing me to pair both my laptop and phone simultaneously, which is perfect for when I'm working on the go, but don't want to miss important phone calls. I got my everyday earbuds in the purple colorway, which look absolutely stunning in person, and they stay in my ears very well, even when I'm active. If you would like to try these out for yourself, Raycon offer a 30-day happiness guarantee, no questions asked. Just go to buyraycon.com/Denki or scan the QR code on your screen to get 20% off site-wide. Again, huge thanks to Raycon again for sponsoring this portion of the video. And now back to our coverage of the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, full disclosure, Nintendo did invite me out to New York to grab footage of this console and try it out for myself, but they have no say in my actual opinions expressed in this video. But yeah, here it is, the Switch 2. It is in my hands, it's very real, also at least mentally quite larger than I was expecting, but still comfortable to hold. The Switch 2 maintains similar thickness to the original Switch at 13.9 millimeters, but with a larger footprint overall, there is way more to hold here, and the weight feels light enough and properly distributed. While I haven't spent a crazy long time using the console, it does still feel like a good enough size to transport around and play for long periods of time. Should you actually want to place it on a table, the new kickstand also feels pretty solid and has plenty of resistance on it to keep the console at whatever angle you set it at to play. Plus, it having a ring design does seem a little more optimal compared to the kickstands of last generation, allowing you to cleanly tuck away a battery bank and cable when fully kicked out. Now, part of what makes the Switch 2's footprint larger is the bigger screen. This guy has a 7.9-inch LCD, which is up from the 6.2-inch display on the OG Switch, and 7-inch on the Switch OLED. Plus, it also runs at a native 1080p resolution at up to 120 FPS. Now, in the demos that I've tried, most games, at least to my eye, were running at 60 FPS, with I think the sole exception being Cyberpunk 2077, which was running at 30. But in the case of Mario Kart World, which I believe was running at 60, it looked quite nice, and also had HDR support as well. While it would have been nice for the Switch 2 to have an OLED display, honestly, this LCD looked quite bright and especially sharp given the pixel density at 1080p. Also, given how Nintendo priced this console, maybe it being OLED is not so much of a bad thing. Otherwise, it would have been balls expensive. However, maybe down the line when components get cheaper, I would love to see an upgraded display, maybe in a later model. But for now, it is what it is. Something else the larger footprint of the Switch 2 gives is better ergonomics, especially when using the Joy-Con 2s. The original ones were quite small and honestly uncomfortable to grip at times, but this new design is an upgrade full stop. It feels what I would like to think are adult-sized hands way better. The analog sticks are also bigger and feel way better to use. Plus, the shoulder buttons are also more pronounced as well. All of this is made better by the fact that the new mechanism for attaching and detaching Joy-Cons to the console is way more robust. This time around, it's a magnetic system that slots the whole controller unit into the console itself, and even the quick release button is easier to access. Though of course not enough to accidentally hit it and kick your Joy-Cons out. Hell, I'd even say I like this mechanism more just on the basis that it's way more satisfying in terms of feel and sound. But perhaps the coolest part of the new Joy-Con 2s is the fact that both the left and right controller have a mouse sensor built in. This adds a new dimension of control in certain Switch games such as Drag and Drive, mimicking moving a wheelchair and shooting hoops. In this game, you are literally hopping between mouse and motion control seamlessly, but this new functionality also allows games like Civ 7 to shine, especially since that really works best with a mouse and cursor. It feels weird to say, but honestly, I was really surprised at how nice Joy-Con 2s were as a mouse. With your shoulder and trigger buttons acting as your left and right click, the implementation is miles better than I was expecting. Now, getting some actual gaming done with the Switch 2, I spent a lot of time playing Mario Kart World. Probably because I spent a lot of time playing these games as a kid, since I was like 4. And the new one is exciting to say the least. It's this clever mix of what we've always loved with Mario Kart mixed with the open world freedom of something like Forza Horizon. I found myself getting particularly invested in that new Knockout Tour mode, which is this long-winded battle royale style race that got my blood pressure up. It was so much fun. Even though it went from 0
Oh, we're doing so good!
to 100 really quick.
Oh, wait, what happened? Wait, was everyone literally behind us? Wait, that's so messed up!
I also got to play a little of Cyberpunk 2077, which is obviously far from displaying PS5 levels of graphic fidelity, but to get a rough idea of the performance level we're getting out of the Switch 2, while docked, the game was running at 30 FPS quality mode, and there will be fidelity modes to choose from. And honestly, in this current build, which isn't final, it actually looked a tad bit better than the Steam Deck version. Staying true to the style of the game, a lot of the models, and especially lighting effects, look quite good. Though of course, the Switch 2 will shine the best with its first-party titles that are really optimized for the hardware. Got some quick seat time in with Tears of the Kingdom in handheld mode, and immediately I saw draw distance and environment detail that looked way better than the previous gen. Not really a surprise, but Switch fans rejoice. And then at the end, I got to see some Donkey Kong Bonanza gameplay, which looked absolutely beautiful in docked mode. Speaking of which, let's talk about that new dock. For this generation, the big story is that it has a built-in fan for active cooling, which is definitely going to come in handy when pushing the graphics high. Over HDMI, the dock will output in up to 4K 60, it'll also do 1440p, and as far as what we were actually able to try out, there was a Metroid Prime Beyond demo, which was running at 1080p 120 to a TV, which looked buttery smooth. Now, something that I found particularly odd about the Switch 2 dock is that it still utilizes 2 USB-A ports on the side. However, a lot of Nintendo's new accessories for this console are leaning hard into USB-C, such as the camera for streaming video. What this means is you're doing this weird thing of plugging it into your Switch 2 directly on the top of the console, and it's not like you're going to be taking this camera with you everywhere, and ideally it would just be plugged into the dock for when you're in your living room. So the port selection is most certainly a choice. To rein some of this excitement in, there are some downsides I'm seeing with the Switch 2. Some of them are in the short term, others might be long-term concerns. First is the battery life. Now, obviously in my limited amount of testing time, there is no way I can talk about how well the Switch 2 lasts on a single charge. However, at least from what we know on paper, the battery is physically larger than the Switch 1 at 5,220 milliamps. But with the custom NVIDIA hardware in here and the larger screen, they are sure to be using up a bit more power. Nintendo is claiming 2 to 6.5 hours of playtime on the Switch 2, which is down from the 4.5 to 9 hour estimate on the previous Redbox Switch. In my opinion, this isn't great, though it's not terrible either, considering that it is on par with the Steam Deck and Steam Deck OLED, and also factoring in the extra performance we are getting here. I think this is an okay trade-off, though just keep this in mind if you were hoping for Redbox Switch or Switch Lite levels of endurance. Moving on, to circle back to some of the discourse around games that I started this video with, buying games both physically and digitally are not as straightforward as they were with the Switch 1. To start, the Switch 2 uses a new, faster game card for physical titles, denoted with a red housing. Otherwise, it does share the same physical shape as Switch 1 cards, allowing for backwards compatibility with last gen, which is pretty nice. It's good to know you aren't just throwing away your library of old games. Plus, you can actually upgrade certain Switch 1 games to a Switch 2 Edition version, which brings not only visual upgrades, but also extra features as well. It's worth noting that these are all paid, and while we don't have official pricing yet, with some mental math, titles like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom should cost around $20 each to upgrade if you already own the original. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it would have been nice to at least include some major titles free of charge, and there's nothing stopping you from playing the old version as is, but it is what it is. I feel like that's a running theme of the Switch 2 video today. It is what it is. Also, something to note when it comes to buying physical games at retail, to dispel some concerns that you might have heard or seen online, some games will absolutely be loaded onto cards directly. Cyberpunk 2077 is said to be written on a 64 gig unit. However, where the issues really lie with people are with these, quote, game card keys, which are in other words a physical authenticator card for games that you already have downloaded. Now, this isn't really anything new. When it comes to buying physical games these days, especially on the PS5 and Xbox Series X, a lot of Blu-rays really are just a physical key, which makes sense for those formats considering that Blu-ray read speeds are not quite on par with solid-state media when it comes to loading data. Now, the good thing here is that all it takes is a trained eye to really know. Nintendo denotes this on the case itself, so definitely look out for that when buying Switch 2 games in store. Now, when it comes to actually downloading your games, thankfully the Switch 2 does come with a decent amount of internal storage on board at 256 gigs. However, don't expect the micro SD card that you already have in your Switch 1 to work for loading games. For faster data rates, Nintendo actually decided to opt for a micro SD express port, which is set to transfer at about 4x the speed of traditional micro SD cards. The slight caveats are that your old SD cards will still technically work with the console, though just for taking screenshots, so it's basically useless. Though the main thing to keep in mind is that the pricing for these new micro SD express cards is pretty expensive, at least for the moment, with a 1 terabyte option from Lexar costing as much as $200. Don't worry, it'll most certainly come down in price in the next year, and at least in the interim, 256 gig cards do cost around $50 to double your space. Overall, after getting some hands-on time with the Switch 2, I can't deny that it brings the fun of the original console, at least in a vacuum. But I do think that potential buyers will have to overcome some mental hurdles to really consider it. Again, after sitting on this for a day, I think that the $449 price tag for the entire package and $500 for the Mario Kart World Bundle, which does include the game, might not be the greatest deal in the world, but it is certainly not bad either. Really, what I think the Switch 2 does is put into context just how good we had things with the original Nintendo Switch. Remember, that console was crafted out of desperation following the abysmal Wii U generation. Nintendo really needed something to stick, and arguably.
This video will help you understand what a stroke is.
And arguably the Switch was positioned aggressively from the get-go. Not only did it work, but obviously we know now that the Switch is heading for the top spot amongst the greatest selling consoles of all time. Perhaps the bigger pill to swallow here is the expensive games cost. Granted, as the new impending norm, I do think we all have to acclimate to the $80 price point for AAAs, whether we like it or not. Just as we did with games jumping from $50 to $60 and even to $70 with this current generation. If not for Nintendo, you better believe that the next gen Xbox and PlayStation titles over the next couple of years will hit that price point. And even GTA 6 is rumored to hit $100. Again, I'm not saying that I necessarily like this, but in the theme of this video, it is what it is. Other than that, I honestly walked away having a lot of fun with the Switch 2. We will absolutely be getting one in the office to test out long term, so stay tuned and let me know, what do you think about it in the comments?